It's saying it's happening, but you know me, until I see it, it's not real. I'm the doubting Thomas of the internet. Until I see it, until it is apparent, until I see my goofy face on the screen coming back to me. And I know there's a little bit of a lull, and y'all help me out in the chat. You're like, Ron, you're here. You're here, Ron. You're here. The internet has given you another day. Celebrate it. Well, I feel ya, and I have seen it, and it is good. What's up, everybody? Happy Monday, which is a great band, and it's Monday. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you're staying well. I hope you are staying out of trouble, unless it's the good kind. You know what I mean? Shout out to everyone who makes this show possible. Before I bring my guest in, ZT.com, ZHITEA.com. Their tea kind of rules. Makes an amazing holiday gift. You know me. I'm a big fan of the raspberry pecan. I'm a big fan of the Monk's Blend. It's an intense black tea that gives you that punch that you need. And by the way, speaking of punch, we might be trying to form a Placone's Punch, which will be a highly caffeinated tea. We'll see. Obviously, if that happens, you'll be the first to know. Also, our friends over at triageoil.com, TRIAGE oil.com. Trendy name makes topical pain oil that you put on your body. Works wonders. You guys know I use it on my neck. And he educates the public on cannabis issues with his show. Check them out, triageoil.com. All right, without further ado, my guest today, real excited to finally talk to this guy. I've seen him around a few times. We are both part of the Movement for a People's Party National Convention. He is a political activist. He is the host of the Amped Up podcast. Please welcome to the show, Ryan Knight. Ryan, what's up, buddy?
Hey, what's up, Ron? Thank you for having me. Happy Monday morning.
Absolutely. So we're going to get into your story some, but first, a couple stories of the day. So Jimmy Dore, who, you know, and full transparency here, not that I think everybody already knows this, but I'm a regular on the Jimmy Dore show back when the world was open. I'm not on near as often right now because I cannot physically be in studio, but I still write for the show. I write for all the segments you watch. I write for those. And Jimmy has put out a video talking about how progressives can get a vote on Medicare for All. And this has kind of been circulating around the blogosphere. Yep. Folks have been picking it up, talking about it because, well, let's see what he has to say here. Here's what he's saying on what we can do to get a Medicare for All vote.
Begging you. Now is not the time to protect your elected officials. Please pressure the progressive elected officials in Congress to please withhold their vote for a speaker and get us a vote on Medicare for All. And make me eat every word I've ever said about the squad and their strategy of pushing the Democratic Party.
That's the other incentive he throws to people. He's like, I'll eat my words. But
Jimmy sent me this video this morning. He DMs me on Twitter from time to time, or whoever manages his Twitter account sent me the video this morning, and he's absolutely right. You know, Nancy Pelosi runs the Democratic Party the same way that Mitch McConnell runs the Republican Party. You know, they run it like authoritarians. They don't actually seek consensus. Pelosi actually doesn't care what the majority of the base of her party thinks, because the majority of Democratic voters overwhelmingly support Medicare for All. The last poll I checked, 88% of Democratic voters support Medicare for All, and 70% of all voters in the country, Republicans, Democrats, and independents, support Medicare for All. So when you have a policy that is broadly popular throughout the nation, yet we can't even get a floor vote on it in the House of Representatives, when the Democratic Party, the party that is supposed to, quote unquote, represent the people, you know, it's blasphemous. And so Jimmy Dore is absolutely right. It is time. You know, I support the squad. You know, I'm one of those progressives who believes that we need a two-tiered strategy, that, you know, we need to keep, you know, supporting those who want to change the system from within. But I also think that's not enough anymore. Right. We saw, you know, we added Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush this past cycle. But like, if you really are honest with yourself, we're now up to like maybe 8 true progressives in the House. And when there's 435 seats in Congress, somewhere in there, and you only have 8 true progressives, you know, it's we are in a very dangerous place. And so we need those progressives who are in the party to actually use their power to pressure Nancy Pelosi. So I'm fully on board with that. In addition, I believe we also need to, pressure from the outside, with the Movement for a People's Party, as you touched on when you introduced me. But as far as pressuring AOC and the squad to exert their power and use their power to help the people and get a floor vote on Medicare for All, I am so on board with this new project from Jimmy Dore, and I 100% support it.
So, and to be clear for everyone watching and listening, so what Jimmy's calling for here, and a lot of other people have echoed it as well, because it is a good idea, is the progressives need to basically say, hey, we're not going to vote for you, Pelosi. We're not. They're going to bring this vote. It could happen as early as January 3rd, the vote for speaker. And if progressives say, hey, we're going to withhold our vote for you unless you give us a vote on Medicare for All, that's a fair strategy. The number that Jimmy's floated around is 15, because if you subtract 15 from 222, which is the number the Democrats have, it brings them down to the number Republicans have. So that's kind of the strategy there, which would work. Now, Mark Pocan, or Pocan, however you say his name, the guy from Wisconsin, he has already responded to this, because Jimmy sent me the video because I wrote for it. Mark Pocan has responded to this idea. And of course, he doesn't want to do this. Now, his excuses, and they are incredibly shitty excuses. His first thing was the 15 number. He's like, well, that 15. I mean, I don't know. Where are you getting at? Where are you getting it? It's like, well, you know where we're getting it. If you subtract 222 minus 15 is the same number of Republicans. That's how it works. That's where you're getting the number there. And the whole point is, if enough progressives withhold their vote, which there's a bunch of people in the progressive caucus, then Nancy Pelosi would have to give a vote on Medicare for All. So by picking on the 15 number, you're just really splitting hairs and desperately grasping for straws. The other excuse he gave was, he goes, well, it probably wouldn't pass. It might not pass. It won't pass. Yeah, dude. But here's the thing. You make these people go on record during a pandemic denying healthcare to people. And on the record, even if we weren't in the pandemic, which we are, but even if we weren't, they're still having to go on record denying something 70% of the country wants. So not only are they thumbing their nose at public opinion, which is a big whammy there, double whammy, you're denying people healthcare during a pandemic. Make these parasites go on the record.
Yeah, and it's also a way to hold these leaders accountable who think they're above reproach and above, they think that they can, Pelosi thinks she can do whatever she wants and suffer no consequences. And it is time. It is time for these progressives, if you're truly progressive and you believe in governing for the will of the people, well, the will of the people want Medicare for all. And so it is time for, AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley and now, Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush. It's time for them to challenge Pelosi. And I think this is a fantastic way to do it. And I also think we need to be clear. The only reason that the Democratic leadership, that Pelosi and the party doesn't want to vote for Medicare for All, because although it will be good for the people, it'll be bad for their corporate donors. And the giant insurance corporations are one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party. So that is the only reason we don't have a single payer healthcare system, that the party that is supposed to represent the people is actually representing their corporate donors, just like the Republican Party is. So essentially we have two corporate, capitalist parties that are working for Wall Street, giant corporations, and the billionaire class, and they're not representing the people. And that, in essence, is the problem with our government. That is why we have so much inequality in America and so much injustice in America. And that is why Jimmy Dore is 100% correct. He takes a lot of flack on from liberals and from neoliberals. And look, I welcome that flack. They've been giving me a lot of flack too, since I've been more outspoken and challenging these dinosaurs that we have in Congress.
Your Twitter threads. Your Twitter threads.
Because I have a lot of liberal followers.
Should be studied in a freaking... wait, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But it's like, your Twitter threads are like... I mean, this psychology classes should be dissecting your Twitter threads, because so many of the responses you get, it's like... I don't think it's fair to call it cult-like. It is a cult. Like you don't need the like there. Like just just gaslighting creepy shit like Ryan, I hope you see clearly, Ryan. You've lost your way, Ryan. When did you, the Kool-Aid's in the refrigerator, Ryan, please go back to it. Take the tablets, Ryan. Move closer to the tablets, Ryan. Here's
no, these liberals have, both parties have done it. Both parties are built around this kind of cult of personality where, it's like the red team versus the blue team. And they don't even realize that, I think that Americans are so blinded by political partisanship that they can't see that both corporate parties are rigging the system against us. It's truly, the liberals will watch, CNN or MSNBC, and, the pundits on those corporate networks will tell them that, yeah, Trump and conservatives, they're responsible for all the problems in this country. And then conservatives will watch Fox News, and Fox News will tell them, no, it's Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and the liberals. They're responsible for all the problems in this country. And so while each side is blaming the other, what ends up happening is the 99% is so busy fighting each other that they don't see that these corrupt politicians are rigging the system for the 1%, right? And that is, in essence, the problem that we have. Both echo chambers, both cults of personalities, both of these political parties, they don't represent the people, but they do a good job of getting their bases to be blindly obedient to these corrupt corporate parties, right? They don't want truly informed voters and educated voters. They don't want these voters to know how much money, both parties take from the giant insurance companies and big pharma and the defense industry and, the big oil companies. They want, people arguing about kind of more cultural issues and these wedge issues they use to divide us, so that we will continue to live under this kind of corporate duopoly. And while the billionaire class makes more and more money, and these corrupt politicians make more and more money, and they're essentially, using our government to enrich themselves and their corporate donors. And we, the people, are paying the price. And so, I mean, I used to be more liberal. And so, a lot of my followers, they will come at me and for simply advocating for everyone in this country to have healthcare and future generations to have a habitable planet. They'll say things like, you must have a really bad drinking problem. And I'll be like, actually, no, I got sober 9 years ago, but thank you for thinking that. Or they'll say things like, you're crazy. You must have mental health issues. And it's like, yeah, thanks for equating, mental health with the fact that I want everyone in this country to get mental health care and have Medicare for all, so it's amazing to me the lengths that these kind of blindly obedient liberals will go to defend the Democratic Party and defend people like Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Barack Obama, who are not working for the interests of the American people. And I think one other thing I need to say is I think that these corporate Democrats over the last 2 decades have actually done a really brilliant job of kind of baiting and switching the American people. And what I mean is they sedate the public with these platitudes of hope and change, right? Obama, look at someone like Obama. For 8 years, he sedated the public, with hope and change. And I think it confused a lot of people because meanwhile, while he's spouting these platitudes on television and telling these great stories, and Obama was a great orator and a great storyteller, as soon as they get off the camera, they go from spouting platitudes of hope and change to governing for Wall Street, giant corporations, and the ruling class. And so you have a party that, in essence, just provides lip service and platitudes and then governs just like the Republicans do. And we are in a moment in history where platitudes aren't enough. Platitudes aren't going to stop the racial injustice crisis. Platitudes aren't going to stop the economic inequality crisis. Platitudes aren't going to stop the climate crisis and the cost of healthcare crisis. And so
they're not going to end the wars.
They're not going to end the endless wars. And so we have massive problems in this country. And we've got the party that's supposed to represent the people, which just spouting platitudes and then governing for Wall Street. And those days are over. Like, fine, you did that for the last 40 years and got away with it, but you're going to try to pull that same status quo neoliberal BS in this moment when there's this much injustice and this much inequality. That's not going to fly anymore. So, I'm grateful for Jimmy Dore for getting out there and speaking up. And I'm grateful for you, for having a program that is actually educating the American people on what is truly going on here. Because if it wasn't for that, we'd have no true voice for the progressive movement. And we'd be continued to be suffocated by these empty platitudes that these comfortable liberals keep falling for.
So call your congressperson, everybody. Call your congressperson. Tell them we want you to withhold your vote for Nancy Pelosi unless they force a vote on Medicare for All. And if your congressperson is one of those people not for Medicare for All, make it clear to them you want them to go on record as being against it. Be like, you're against it? I'm a voter in your district. You go on record being against it. We want those receipts. We want those receipts. This is an awesome strategy. And we, the people, have the chance to make it successful, especially if you're calling someone from the squad, if you're calling one of the progressive members. Hey, look, this is a situation where they're really going to show their hand to us. They're really going to show us the cards they're holding. And they're going to show us, do people come first? Or do your not just your donors, but your special interest and shielding your colleagues? What's more important? Are you in the Beltway where you're going to shield your colleagues? So-and-so is not from Medicare for All because they get a lot of big pharma money. I don't want to hurt their feelings. Or are you going to be for the people and being like, no, we need Medicare for All. The people need Medicare for All. We're for it. We're not afraid to be for it. And my colleagues that aren't for it, well, they're going to have to thumb their nose at public opinion, and it's going to go on paper. Tough.
And we also have to be clear, like, this is a great strategy from Jimmy Dore, because let's remember, all of these progressives that were asking to, challenge Pelosi, they ran for office and got elected on Medicare for All.
Yeah.
That is why they're there. That is why AOC is there. And that is why Jamal Bowman is there, and Cori Bush and the squad. They're there to advocate for Medicare for All and advocate for the people. So I think that, and I also think that they don't realize, like, this is a moment for them to, like, actually show the party, like, who does control the party. Is it the corporate interests, or is it the people? Is it the progressives who actually are, who actually work for the people? And so this is a moment for them to kind of show us who they truly are. Are you truly unequivocally for the people? And I believe they are. So let's hope they get on board here. And I've endorsed and helped a lot of their campaigns. This cycle I endorsed Jamal Bowman. And look, I'm, as someone who also advocates for the People's Party, again, I think there's space in the progressive movement for both strategies, because I also think that, our enemy is not fellow progressives. Our enemies are these corporatists who are standing in the way of progress for the people. So if the progressives, if we all start fighting each other and don't stay focused on the corporatists, on exposing these corporatists, then I think we will run into more problems in our movement. But asking AOC and the squad to call on Pelosi to take a floor vote on Medicare for All, I don't think that is anything that is I think we're well in the bounds here, and I think it's a smart strategy. And I also think, I know AOC in a speech last year, I remember it, or I think it was actually like 6 months ago, where she said in a speech that, the Democratic Party is not even a left party, that it's a center-right party, and that we don't truly have a major left party in America. And then in that same speech, she went on to say that the Democrats control the House of Representatives, and we can't even get a floor vote on Medicare for All. So she knows this. She's well aware of this. So let's see her now lead and challenge Pelosi. Because if you can't do that, then that's kind of the point, right? What's the point of having power if you're not going to use your power for the greater good, and use your power to help the people who are struggling so much right now. We know that the majority of these corporate Democrats in Congress use their power to help their corporate donors. Let's get the progressive movement to flex their power now.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And what you were saying about strategy, I mean, yeah, I've had similar things where, I think we need to totally build outside of the Democratic Party. Like, I do think that that's a strategy we definitely need to do.
Yep.
I think kind of history points to that. However, someone tweeted at me once, I was happy when Cori Bush won. And someone tweeted at me, they're like, well, why are you happy? Because you advocate for a new party. You don't want, and I'm like, because first of all, if a new party is successful, people can switch, first of all. Second of all,
that's the whole point. Yeah, we want the progressives to come over to the People's Party. And they're not going to come over if we're trashing them all day and not working with them against the corporatists.
Agreed. And then the other thing too, like, we have to be open to the idea that, if People's Party is successful in building a true viable alternative that really threatens this duopoly, they're not going to go down gentle. So what we might see is they might have to give us some concessions with stuff like ranked choice voting and different things that kind of make us more of a multi-party system and make us less of a duopoly, which means you would see alliances form between the progressives who have infiltrated the Democratic Party and the People's Party and the Greens and stuff like that. So there's no, you don't need to pick one focus and be against the other ones. You can be for all of them, and you can still think we need something outside the Democratic Party and be happy when Cori Bush or someone like her wins. You can totally have both of those things. Well, you don't need to choose.
Well, and that's where I wish more nuanced discussion like we're having could come into focus more often. Because look, the thing I love most about the progressive movement is that it's built on solidarity. It's built on forming a multiracial, multi-generational coalition of working class voters who are tired of living in a system and tired of a government that is repressing them. People are tired of living under corporate rule. They're tired of living under heartless plutocrats like Jeff Bezos, who made $13 billion in a single day this year, but then doesn't pay for all of his employees to have health care. We're tired of living under this, this repressive oligarchy. And so the point is to build solidarity with everyone who can imagine that a better world is possible. And so part of building that solidarity is understanding, like, look, I voted for the Green Party for the first time in my life this year, while I'm also helping the movement for a People's Party. But like, I want to build solidarity with the Greens and with people who support, the movement for a People's Party, and people who support the PSL party, the Party of Socialism and Liberation Party. We need to build solidarity amongst the entire working class. And that also means building solidarity, which this can be controversial, but, building solidarity with people who in the past who voted Republican. There's a lot of people who in the past maybe voted for Trump or voted for Bush or, that are very disenchanted with the Republican Party, who, just like these corporate Democrats, are serving Wall Street and the billionaire class, and they're not serving the people. So, again, we have to remember that the duopoly stays in power by division. It's the oldest political strategy in the book, divide and conquer. And so the greatest threat to the duopoly and to the oligarchy is a multiracial, multi-generational coalition of voters who are Democrats, Republicans, and independents coming together and taking our power back from a system that has robbed us of so much. So it's important to kind of remember that. In all ways, I try to, as an activist, I always am trying to look on ways to build solidarity with people who are tired of this government. Because as soon as we start fighting each other, and leftists, I've learned in the last year, there's a lot of amazing, dynamic people in the progressive leftist movement, but sometimes I think we can be blinded by righteousness as well.
We can bicker. We can bicker.
Yeah, we can bicker. And so it's important to remember the overall thing here is that we're all fighting for justice and liberation and to bring dignity to all people. And so I think it's important to remember that as well.
So, first of all, everyone watching, if you got any questions, got any thoughts, please super chat it up. I get demonetized every day. Your super chats keep this show on the air. And I want to go here next. And I want to give a quick shout out to my buddy Gareth Reynolds from the Dollop, because he tweeted this out. I'm going to paraphrase the tweet, but he tweeted this out. Eric Garcetti managed to do something very rare. He managed to unite all of Los Angeles in realizing he's a total asshole. Shout out to my buddy Gareth who tweeted that out. Make sure you follow him, Gareth Reynolds, on Twitter, and check out his podcast, The Dollop. But so this happened yesterday. The People's City Council, which I recommend everybody follow on Twitter, People's City Council here, they took this video. So people have been protesting outside of Mayor Garcetti's house. And here's what the cops did yesterday. I'm actually going to watch it with the sound off. It's a little easier to just kind of watch. But check this out. The media has been reporting this as the cops and the protesters, quote unquote, clashing. Let me know if this looks like a clash. I'm doing air quotes for everyone listening to the audio podcast later. Let me know if this looks like a clash to you. So the cops are standing on the other end. This is being filmed by a protester who's across the street. That place that they're guarding like stormtroopers is the mayor's mansion. So here they are. Here they are. Those people are holding cameras. They're not hurting anyone. Some of them, their backs are turned. And what do they do? What do they do? Is that like a clash to anyone?
Wow. No.
They just start beating the shit out of people. They just start beating people. They just walk across the street. People are just holding cameras. They just start beating people.
And not just beating people.
The
they're beating people that are advocating for justice.
Yeah.
Like, and they're protecting a mayor who thinks he's above justice and thinks he can continue, in a city like LA that's supposed to be this kind of liberal bastion. Like, it's not. Look how this mayor is governing his city, and the police are protecting him instead of protecting our city and protecting people who are exercising their First Amendment rights, to advocate for justice. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I think it speaks to like the country we live in right now. Like, this isn't a democracy. America is not a democracy. Like, we are an oligarchy where, democracy is a government that is of, by, and for the people. We live in an oligarchy, which is a government that is of, by, and for the ruling class. And these cops, are just protecting the ruling class right here. They're not protecting citizens.
What's crazy is like we could basically apply every kind of shitty definition of something you don't want could be applied to the United States and be accurate. Like, yeah, we are an oligarchy. You could also call us a plutocracy. That makes sense too. We're a plutocracy. I think it's totally fair to call us an authoritarian theocracy. I think in many ways that's totally what we are. Like all the shitty
You could
ones,
call us a fascist state.
Totally. All the good ones though we don't get. You can't be like, oh, we're socialists. But no, we're not. We're not like, oh, we're a democracy. No, nowhere close. We're not even a democratically selected republic. We're not even that. We're not even that. All the shitty ones, we can check those boxes. All the good ones, not even close. Yep. And so here's the best part about what just happened with LA's mayor, which, by the way, the cops were doing that at the behest of the mayor. He ordered them to do that after his goofy, the stay-at-home order, which I know this is maybe just like picking on semantics, but I don't know if you read that thing. I read the whole thing. They didn't actually include that you were able to go out for essential sunlight. It wasn't actually in there, but they're like, but you could, if you got to shoot a movie, that's great. If you got to film a podcast, that's fine. And if you want to go to a shopping mall, if you're going to capitalism, we're fine with it. That's great. That's totally fine.
Here's the whole thing with the whole stay-at-home orders and the pandemic. I think it's really exposed just the blind predatory capitalism of America and the problem with having a government that doesn't work for the people or small businesses and just works for Wall Street and giant corporations is, if you want people to stay at home, and if we had a truly humane government that cared for its people, it would have done what most European nations did, what Canada did, is give people cash, give people $2,000 a month so they can safely stay at home for a few months, when the pandemic was really bad. So they're not at work and they're not spreading it. But what our government did is just basically it gave a little bit of enhanced unemployment for a moment. But it basically was like, essential workers had to go to work. So they're spreading the virus. And then it put really strict orders on smaller businesses and basically just gave a huge bailout to these giant corporations. So in the pandemic, we've seen the billionaire class, like what they've increased their net wealth by over $1 trillion. We're seeing Amazon's profits are up 100%. Walmart's profits are up 100%. Target's profits are up 80%, while we've seen 21% of small businesses permanently close. And so it's like there's two different rules, where they're telling small businesses they can't, mom and pop shops can't stay open, while Walmarts and the Amazons of the world are making record profits. And so it's all just so imbalanced, and it's going to implode. There's no balance in this kind of an economy. And there already wasn't before the pandemic, but the pandemic just kind of amplified all of this injustice and inequality. And so, if you're telling a small business that they can't work, but yet you're saying the Amazons and the big grocery stores can stay open, like, how is that fair? How is that balanced? And so that really is the problem, that the working class got screwed up in all these relief bills. Small businesses got screwed in all these relief bills, while the billionaire class and giant corporations just made out like bandits. And here we are. And now we have 40 million people who are facing eviction in the next few months. We have 50 million Americans who are going hungry. And this is just beyond cruelty. And if we don't see some real action by our government, if we don't see a relief bill that includes real help for small businesses and that includes direct cash payments, which should be $2,000 a month to every person in this country, I'm really worried about what is going to happen in the beginning of the first quarter of 2021.
Oh, especially when the eviction moratoriums go away.
Right.
I mean, and especially in a place here like LA, I mean, so many people are just housing insecure right now. And it's like, yeah, they can't pay rent. You can't evict them yet. But what's going to happen once they can be evicted? I mean, it is nuts. And then here you see a guy, public gatherings are not permitted right now unless it's for a religious ceremony outdoors or a public protest. But if you do that latter thing, the cops are going to crack your head under his orders. Now, here's the best part. He got rewarded recently for this. Biden and Harris named 5 inaugural committee co-chairs, and guess who one of them is? Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti. So Biden's leaning on him. Biden's turning to him. Meanwhile, this is what he's doing in his own city. He's having cops brutalize protesters who are protesting at his house, and for good reason. He has done nothing about the rampant police brutality in this city. He has done nothing for the people. They're calling for no vacancy. He's ignoring it. And so they're protesting, and justifiably so. And he's sending cops to crack their heads. They're not doing anything. This is not a clash. A clash would be if both sides tried to physically harm each other. We just watched the video. That's not what happened. I mean, unless some of those camera phones had freaking lasers that were firing at the police.
No, I mean, this is a repressive oligarchy stepping its foot on the people who are just crying out for justice. I mean, this is not, there's nothing democratic about the video that I just saw.
Are you for a general strike?
Absolutely.
I stand for a general strike.
Absolutely. Especially like as soon as the pandemic is under control and we have the vaccines and it's safe, or if the general strike is just everyone staying at home. Absolutely, I support a general strike. I mean, we just saw in India the greatest, I think it's the biggest strike in human history. 250 million Indian farmers and workers went on strike to protest against their right-wing repressive government and demanding, justice and demanding fair pay. And absolutely, I mean, this
and shout out to MSNBC who covered that nonstop. No, I'm just kidding.
No, you don't hear any about that.
Corporate media didn't cover it at all.
No, and also we're actually seeing there's now a worldwide Amazon workers are now building a coalition throughout the world and are going to start going on strike against Amazon. So we're seeing that as well. And of course, you don't see the corporate media report on that either. So we are seeing the working class rise up and take their power back from these repressive governments. And I think it's about time. I mean, the path that we are on right now is just not sustainable. You cannot have an economy where the rich just keep getting richer and, the poor and the working class keep getting poorer. And we've been on this path for the last half century, and so, when liberals say that, America is dying or America is failing because of one corrupt president, they're completely missing the bigger picture. America is not failing because of one corrupt president. America is failing because our entire system is corrupt. We have two capitalist parties who both serve Wall Street and the billionaire class, and we have no major party that actually serves the people. And that's really the problem. You can't have a government that just works for these giant corporations and doesn't work for the people. And we've seen now we have 3 billionaires now own more wealth than half of our entire nation combined. We have 140 million Americans who are either poor or low income. And we have 92 million Americans who are either underinsured or uninsured. So in the quote unquote richest nation on earth, we have massive levels of inequality and injustice. And if we don't treat the root causes of that, if we don't treat this blind, predatory, capitalistic system and have a new economic bill of rights, I mean, we need that kind of approach right now, kind of like what FDR did, during right after the Great Depression. If we don't have that kind of signature piece of legislation that kind of renegotiates the contract between capital and labor, this country is going to implode, and it should. We need revolutionary change right now, and we're not going to get that from the Biden administration. We are going to get the exact same milquetoast neoliberal policies that enabled and emboldened the rise of neo-fascism and the rise of Donald Trump. And that's what these liberals don't get by thumbing their nose at Bernie and by derailing Bernie's movement. All they've done is essentially just embolden, because liberalism paves the way for neo-fascism. So all they did is buy a little time, maybe, but they are going to embolden another far-right neo-fascist in 2024 or 2028 because Biden would look his cabinet. It's all a bunch of corporatists.
Oh yeah. Well, I would say that Biden is a neocon. I think it's he
especially on foreign policy.
Right, exactly.
In foreign policy, he's a neocon for sure.
Absolutely, and I think really at the end of the day, that's the main difference between a neocon and a neoliberal. Like a neoliberal is, terrible domestically. On foreign policy, maybe they're not going to be as brutal as the neocon. The neocon is Dick Cheney land. I would say it's fair to say Joe Biden is in Dick Cheney land. He might talk a little nicer, but he's in Dick Cheney land. So he's a neocon. A neocon leads to a neo-fascist and vice versa. So the cycle didn't break. And I feel like so many of us were in such a weird situation in November where it's like, I'm happy Trump's going away. Sure, Trump's terrible. I don't disagree with that. But look at what's replacing him. I was trying to be the biggest optimist in the world, Ryan. I was trying to be like, well, wait a second. There's still a couple months. We might be able to abolish the presidency, and then we have a win-win. Trump goes away, but we don't have to watch Biden win either. I'm not giving up hope. I'm not giving up hope.
No, you're right. I mean, the very conditions, Obama's presidency are the very conditions that laid the path for someone like Donald Trump to rise to power. And so the problem with this neoliberalism is that it doesn't treat people's material conditions. It doesn't help the poor. It doesn't help the working class. It doesn't help marginalized communities. And so, I think the reason these comfortable liberals don't get it is because when you've got a little bit of money in the bank and you've got healthcare, sure, it's enough to just turn on the TV and hear Obama spouting hope and change platitudes, right? Or if you got a little money in the bank and you have healthcare, it's enough to see, Joe Biden and Kamala's speech they gave, after they won. But if you are struggling, and if you don't have healthcare and your job has been shipped overseas, then you don't give a crap about hope and change platitudes. You're like, where is my Medicare for All? Where are policies that are going to improve the material conditions of my life? How can I get food on my table? And so that's really the big disconnect, is these liberals don't understand, how the policies that both corporate parties have implemented over the past half century have not benefited the poor and the working class at all. In fact, they've done nothing but repress them and just consolidate wealth into the billionaire class and into these giant corporations. And so until we treat the root causes, until we actually have a government that is fair and that will work for the people, we're going to continue in this cycle that goes back and forth between, this kind of center-right, or like you call it, neocon kind of corporate extremism, and this far-right neo-fascism. And neither of those politics is a politics that will heal this nation and move this nation forward, which is why it's so important for the Jimmy Dores of the world to challenge progressives to actually hold Pelosi accountable, and why it's so important to band together and form this movement for a People's Party, because I just don't see any real relief coming from either of these corporate parties, unfortunately.
So let's talk about you. You used to be proud resistor. Now you are proud socialist. In the words of the great philosopher of our time, Hillary Clinton, what happened?
What happened? It's interesting. I actually supported Bernie in 2016.
Okay.
He was like, when he came, I watched those debates, and, my partner was for Hillary. And I was for Bernie. And for the first time, I felt like I heard someone on a debate stage talking about the real issues in our country, talking about how both parties are owned by giant corporations in the billionaire class, talking about, the unfair, campaign finance system we have up where these corporations can buy public officials, talking about the fact that we are the only developed nation on earth that doesn't provide healthcare to all of its people. And so I've supported Bernie in the 2016 primary. But what ended up happening for me was, I'm a lifelong Democrat, for the last 18 years. Every election I've voted for the Democrat. And like a good little obedient Democrat, after Bernie ran, I got on board and supported Hillary in the general in 2016. And, I think what's so interesting is, and I think this is why I share this, is someone like me who voted for Bernie. It was like the message the corporate media put out after that. It was like, great job, Bernie. Like, great job, but like, it's just a little unrealistic, or the ones who would say, oh, it's too divisive. Giving everyone in this country healthcare is just divisive, or, they somehow kind of framed Bernie's message as being divisive because it challenged corporate power and it gave dignity to the working class and the poor. And it's someone like who was excited by Bernie in the 2016 primary and who voted for Bernie. I would say that I went back to sleep after he lost and was like, yeah, I guess, that was unrealistic. I settled, if you will. And then I'm not ashamed to admit it. After Hillary lost and the media, what was the first thing they did? They didn't take accountability for Hillary's loss. They blamed everyone else except Hillary Clinton and the failed policies, of the neoliberal establishment. They blamed Jill Stein. They blamed the Green Party. They blamed Bernie Sanders. They blamed Russia. And for the first 8 months to a year, I bought the narrative. And that's how powerful the corporate media and the Democratic establishment are, that they literally craft these narratives instead of being like, well, maybe you should have had policies that actually benefited the working class. Maybe you should have campaigned in swing states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. No, it was this whole everyone else's fault but Hillary's. And finally, what woke me up was seeing just again this past cycle, how the corporate media treated Bernie, how, advocating for the poor and the working class is seen as divisive, but standing up and propping up billionaires is somehow considered quote unquote decent. Like I finally just saw through the BS, and I was actually working for, going on a radio program that is more of a mouthpiece for the Democratic establishment. And I would defend Medicare for All on that program. And I initially backed Warren in the primary. And then right after Iowa, with all that kind of fuckery with that app, remember, and Buttigieg claimed victory. Yeah. That I just was like, and Warren kind of started waffling on Medicare for All. And it was at that moment where I just kind of realized it's like, I think Warren was like trying to find a lane in between the corporate establishment and Bernie's progressive lane. And there's no lane in between, it's right. Like if you're in the center, if you're standing in the center between justice and corporatism, like you're just in the way essentially, right? You're just part of the problem. And it finally kind of dawned on me. And so I endorsed Bernie right after the Iowa caucus, and I haven't looked back since. I've just been moving further and further left. And for me, it was just kind of finally waking up and realizing that like the Democratic Party isn't who they say they are. Mm-hmm. They do, these corporate Democrats kind of co-opt the language of the progressive movement because they want our votes, but they don't actually support the policies. They'll go on CNN and they'll say, yeah, climate change is real, but they won't actually support a Green New Deal. Yeah. Or they'll say, healthcare is a human right, but they won't actually support the policy, Medicare for All, to make healthcare a human right. Or they'll say Black Lives Matter, but they won't actually support, defunding the police and shifting resources into Black and brown communities. So I finally just kind of woke up and saw through the platitudes, and I saw through the fact that it's pretty much a lie, that corporate Democrats are no different than Republicans. They just use nicer platitudes, and they still work for the powerful. And so, I think there comes a point where everyone has to ask themselves, when the rich keep getting richer and the poor keep getting poorer, it's like, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on here? Are you on the side of the people? Are you on the side of the poor and the working class and marginalized communities? Or are you on the side of power? Are you on the side of the oligarchy? And there really is, in America right now, there really is just two sides. I would tell people that, you know, the great battle in America now and for the next decade is not liberal versus conservative or red versus blue. It's the people versus the oligarchy, right? It's the people versus the machine.
It really is what Saul Alinsky said. It's the haves and the have-nots.
It truly is. And I think it takes, you know, it takes a while for people to truly accept that. And I think for me, once you truly see the corruption of the Democratic establishment and you see just that, you know, it's all an illusion, and they don't truly, the Democratic Party does not represent the people. They represent their corporate donors. And when you finally just realize that basic fact, there's no going back. So the moment I endorsed Bernie after Iowa, it's like, you know, there was no going back. And I took a lot of heat. You know, I was at one point, I was pretty much a surrogate for her campaign. And I reached out to their campaign after Iowa and said, look, like, you know, I think I raised like $10,000 for them in grassroots money. And I did a lot for their campaign for free, for nothing. I said to them, you know, look, I'm going to endorse Bernie. You know, we need progressive change in this moment, and you don't really have a path to the White House. I was very frank with one of her campaign, their surrogate outreach representative, and they were basically like, please, like, just, you know, don't, you know, maybe just support us and support Bernie, which pretty much I had been doing. And that was the other thing. Like, even though I had
to vote twice.
Yeah. Even though I endorsed Warren, like, I was still, you know, because I supported Bernie in 2016. Like, I remember after one of the earliest debates, I was like, this debate was awesome. Like, seeing Bernie and Warren together, like fighting back against the status quo, and Warren was pushing her wealth tax and Bernie was pushing Medicare for All. And I remember a Warren supporter reach out to me like, you're not allowed to say nice things about Bernie. This is like in 2019. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, and so it's just that tribalism, that factionalism. Like, I just, you know, after Iowa, it was like, forget about it. Like, I am all in with not me, us. I am all in with Bernie and Warren. I was very diplomatic with Warren's campaign. And I just said, look, like, thank you guys and keep fighting the great fight. But, you know, I just don't see Warren has a path. And she didn't. And I think, you know, we had to all consolidate behind Bernie if we had a chance. And I am disappointed in the Warren people who didn't consolidate behind Bernie quicker, because right before Super Tuesday, we saw what happened, right? Yeah. Obama makes the phone call, asked Buttigieg and Klobuchar to get out of the race 3 days before Super Tuesday, endorse Biden and essentially clear the path for Biden right before Super Tuesday. And, you know, Warren didn't do that. You know, I was asking Warren, like a few weeks before that, I was saying, Warren, like, it's time to step down and endorse Bernie. And I was getting attacked for that. I mean, it just, at the end of the day, if, you know, whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the people? Are you on the side of Medicare for All and a Green New Deal and a universal basic income? Or are you on the side of these corrupt politicians who just want to keep working for their corporate donors while the American people are suffering? And I ultimately, after Iowa, just made the decision that, like, I'm a firm, you know, I am behind Bernie. And then what ended up happening is after Bernie lost, after he dropped out, I ended up leaving the Democratic Party, I think in June. And what ended up clinching it for me, and now I'm registered as no party preference. But when the DNC, you know, the two things that have corrupted our government are corporate lobbyists and corporate PAC money. And the DNC had a chance, if it wanted to reform itself this summer. When the DNC Platform Committee voted, they went to vote, and the DNC Platform Committee voted against banning corporate lobbyists from serving on the DNC's committee, and they voted against banning corporate PAC money, right? The two things that have corrupted our government. And then the clincher was they voted against adding Medicare for All to the platform during a pandemic. And it was right after that I realized that, like, the DNC is never going to change. They're always going to act like a private corporation that puts its corporate donors over the basic needs of the people. And in that moment, right after the DNC Platform Committee vote, is when I publicly said I'm leaving the Democratic Party, and I registered as no party preference. And then the People's Party reached out to me a few months later and asked me to get involved with their efforts. And you know, I've been fighting on the outsides of the Democratic Party ever since, while still supporting the few progressives that we have in the party.
It's a good lane to be in. I mean, for me, it was, you know, because I was a contributor on the same program that you were talking about at one point in time, back in 2016, 2017. And, you know, the way I've always seen it is like, okay, you know, I've never really felt like I'm a proud Democrat. I've always felt like, well, I'm a I'm a left-wing person. I mean, I didn't really pay attention to politics until freshman year of college, and I became a pretty big lefty right away because of Iraq. Because I was like, why the hell are we over there? What are we doing? And then I started reading Chomsky and stuff like that. So as far as electoralism was concerned, I was like, well, I'm certainly not a Republican. I don't really identify with the Democrats either, but the Democrats have people like Dennis Kucinich, and the Democrats have, I mean, it's kind of a more, quote, pragmatic way to the type of world I want to see. And then 2016 and 2017 really opened my eyes to the fact that, first of all, there were a lot more people that see the world the way I do than I realized. Bernie showed that to all of us, that it's like, we're not as alone as we thought we were. And it just took a guy in the right place at the right time who said, okay, no one else wants to do this, I will. And showed all of us we're not as alone as we think we were. And also, another thing that happened is all of my worst suspicions from the Democratic Party were confirmed. And not just my worst suspicions confirmed, but it was worse than I realized. To the point where, like, if you would have asked me 4 years ago, do you think that as a lefty, you're more despised than the right by the Democratic Party? I would have said, of course not. And when I say Democrat, I mean the establishment. I don't mean the base, but the establishment. Now, and since 2016, I can say that. Yeah. As a lefty, they hate you more than the right. They being the establishment, not the base, but the establishment. They hate lefties more than they hate the right, because they want you to be satisfied with just, and all these calls for unity, which at first I responded to that. I'm like, you're right. We gotta figure out a way to come together, and we gotta talk this out, and we gotta figure out good policies, because I don't want to see Donald Trump be president. Totally. But then eventually I realized, wait a second, by unity, you don't mean we're going to meet in the middle, no pun intended. You actually mean, hey, progressive, shut the fuck up. Literally, shut the fuck up. Fuck your policies, accept these crumbs, and shut up. And if you're not going to do that, you're the problem.
When a corporate Democrat like Joe Biden or Barack Obama or Nancy Pelosi or Hillary Clinton talk about unity, what they're really talking about is unity with Wall Street, giant corporations, and Americans who are comfortable with the status quo. That's what they mean with unity. And you hit a great point, Ron. The reason that the Democratic establishment hates the left and hates progressives more than they hate Republicans is because we're a threat to their corporate grift. We are a threat to their corporate donors, right? We are a threat to their power, because that's how they get into power. And that's how they stay in power, because they have they take these massive amounts of money from these corporations. And the reason Republicans aren't a threat is because Republicans work for the very same corporate donors that the Democrats do. So when Democrats compromise with Republicans, when a corporatist party like the Democratic Party compromises with a fascist party like the Republican Party, you get legislation that favors corporations and billionaires. You don't get legislation that favors the working class or favors the people. And so that's what people really don't get. We don't really have a true left party in America, right? Especially a major party. We have
not
smaller parties that are outside of the positions of power. But as far as in our government, we do not have a major left party. We have a corporatist party, and we have like a neo-fascist party. Yeah. And so that really is the problem. And until we have a truly left party that actually serves the people and not their corporate donors, nothing is going to fundamentally change in this country. And I think that is the most honest thing, I'll give credit where credit is due, that Joe Biden has ever said in his 40 plus years of his career in politics. It's during the primary, when he told that room full of rich Wall Street donors that, oh, don't worry about if I win, nothing, and I repeat, nothing will fundamentally change. And why it's so big for me is I'm smart enough to realize that if nothing fundamentally changes for the ruling class, then that means that nothing will fundamentally change for the poor and for the working class, who have been carrying this nation on its back for the last 50 years. And we're at a point now where it's like, it's time for them up there who've been profiting off of this system and profiting off the backs and exploiting the labor of the working class. It's time for the billionaire class to pay their fair share. It's time for them, to do their part. And they are just so greedy that they just refuse to change. And the other thing I'll just say is, it is time for us. We need to make these corrupt politicians. We need to make these greedy CEOs. We need to make these heartless oligarchs like Jeff Bezos. We need to make them uncomfortable, because right now they are way too comfortable with it, with basically exploiting the working class, and they are way too comfortable with this corrupt system that they are now, and so we have to make them uncomfortable. There's just no other way I see change happening. And part of that is things what Jimmy Dore's doing, pressuring the progressives to hold Pelosi accountable. Part of that is looking at a general strike. Part of that is the movement for a People's Party. I think one of the things, my big epiphany in the last year is these corporate Democrats keep taking progressives for granted because we have nowhere to go. The left truly electorally, we really don't have a major party that can break the duopoly, or we don't have a threat yet. The Green Party, even though I voted for them, they haven't been able to break through the duopoly in the past 3 decades. And so because there's
the cards are stacked against.
And the cards are stacked against.
I mean,
totally.
So it's not,
Right. But because we don't really have anywhere to go, these corporate Democrats use that to their advantage. And they say things like, well, what are you going to do? Vote for Republicans? That's what I would get, when I was demanding concessions from Biden, before I realized, like, fuck this. You're not even going to give us any concessions. I'm voting green. And I voted green for the first time in my life. But these are the games they play, and they will lesser of two evils us to death. I mean, they got away with it again in this cycle. And they will do it again in 4 years. And so we have to be bold. We have to make the powerful uncomfortable, because right now, again, they're just going to keep exploiting us. They are going to keep this corrupt system going as long as we allow them to get away with it.
So I know you got a heart out, Ryan. So I'll let you plug everything you want to plug. And thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh yeah, I don't really need to plug anything. If you guys want to listen to my podcast, though, you can download it on Apple or wherever, Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. We just had Rose McGowan on this past week, and it was a very insightful interview. She's just such a powerful truth teller, and she's had, she basically talks about the complicity of Hollywood and the corporate media and the Democratic establishment and that whole complicity machine. And it was a very insightful interview. So if you want to go check that out, and keep doing what you're doing, Ron, and we'll be in touch.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Be well.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers. So you can check out Ryan's podcast, Amped Up, wherever you get your podcasts. I look forward to checking the full interview with Rose McGowan, because a lot of things, and, he had a heart out. He had to go at noon. But, yeah, a lot of the things, a lot of people don't realize how, I guess, establishment is a fair way to put it. Hollywood actually is, and kind of how neoliberal it really is as far as the industry and stuff like that. But the optimist in me is seeing that change some. And I think that when the world opens up again, it might look a little different. And as far as Hollywood's concerned, the optimist in me is saying that's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to look different, and it's going to look better. It's going to look like how the Lower East Side looked in the 30s. And then again, in kind of like 60s and 70s, where you had like anti-capitalist theaters ruling the day and stuff like that. And there was just fringe productions going on. I'd like to think something like that will happen in Hollywood. And when I say Hollywood, I don't mean like just literally, Hollywood part of town. I mean like, the LA area, the industry, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, maybe that'll happen. Maybe it won't. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm hoping that it will. And I think it very well could. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in today. I appreciate it very much. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. In the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.